Do you know what happens to the soul of your departed loved one when the whole church celebrates the first apostle who died for Christ? Have you ever considered that this particular day, the 25th of July, holds a specific power over those who have already crossed to the other side? Something takes place on that precise date that connects the blood James poured out with the purification of your loved one. Something that does not depend on you, something that unfolds in a place where you cannot yet enter, but that needs one very concrete thing from you in order to be complete. And that one thing, if you do not do it before the 25th of July, remains undone for a whole year until next July comes around again. James was the first of the 12 to die, the first to drink the chalice that Christ offered him when his own mother had asked for a throne on his behalf. And that place of being first changes everything you are about to hear, because the soul of your departed loved one needs someone who has already walked the road of Christian death before her, someone who knows what it feels like when the body stays behind and the soul steps in front of the living God. James knows. He lived it beneath the sharpened blade of Herod without running. Write down right now in a comment the name of your departed loved one, followed by these words, James, be his road. Write it as someone carving into stone, because what comes next was kept for you, and every word depends on the one before it, like links in a chain that reach all the way up to the throne of the Lamb. On the 25th of July in the year 44 after Christ in Jerusalem, King Herod Agrippa gave the order to behead James, the son of Zebedee, the older brother of John. The book of the Acts of the Apostles tells the story in chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, with a shortness that hurts. It says that Herod laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them, and that he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. 2 lines. That is everything the New Testament devotes to the death of this man. 2 lines for the first apostle who gave up his life after the resurrection. Think about that for a moment. Peter has whole chapters. Paul has letters, journeys, speeches, shipwrecks. John has a gospel, 3 letters, and the book of Revelation. James has 2 lines, and those 2 lines carry one of the most powerful truths the church has ever guarded about the souls of those who die in Christ. Because James died first, before Peter, before Paul, before Andrew, before Bartholomew, before Philip, before Matthew, before all of them. And to die first in God's plan means something very concrete, and it has direct consequences for the soul of your departed loved one. When a soldier falls first in a battle, the ones who come after him already know where the bullets pass. They know which ground is safe and which ground is a trap. They know where the enemy is and where they can push forward. James was that soldier. He was the one who opened up the road of Christian death for everyone who would come afterward. And in heaven, according to the doctrine of the communion of the saints that the church professes in the creed, James continues to carry out that same task. He continues to be the first who goes out to meet the souls that have just crossed over, because he already knows every step of that passage. Saint Teresa of Jesus, in chapter 27 of the book of her life, describes a vision in which she perceived the glory of certain saints in heaven, and how each one carried out a different task according to the way he had lived and died. She understood from that mystical experience that the death of every saint shapes his eternal mission. The way you die determines the way you intercede, and James died as a martyr, as the first, as the one who opened the door with his own blood. What does that mean for your departed loved one? It means that on the 25th of July, when the church celebrates the feast of St. James, the greater with the rank of a liturgical feast throughout the whole Roman calendar, a particular intercession is set in motion in heaven. James knows the fear of the soul that has just left the body. He knows the darkness of that first instant, that split second when everything you once knew disappears, and what remains is the naked truth of who you are before God. He knows the loneliness of being dead while everyone else keeps on living, because he was the first to feel it, and what has been felt first is understood better than anyone else can understand it. Herod ordered him to be executed by the sword. The most ancient tradition, gathered by Eusebius of Caesarea in his ecclesiastical history, says it happened on the hill that Jerusalem's Christians would later call the place of the martyrdom, near the city gate. Clement of Alexandria adds a detail that deserves attention. The soldier who was leading James to the place of execution was so moved by the apostle's serenity that he asked to be baptized on the way, and he died beside him that same day. James received the sentence standing. Acts does not say he begged for mercy. Acts does not say he ran. Acts says that Herod killed him with the sword, and that was that. As if the death of James was so clean, so straight, so free of hesitation, that Luke the evangelist judged 2 lines to be enough. That cleanness matters, because there are deaths that stretch on, that get complicated, that fill up with words and noise. The death of James was fast, blade and blood, and then heaven. And in that heaven, James has been receiving souls for almost 2,000 years, souls arriving with the same bewilderment he himself felt that noonday of July in Jerusalem. Your departed loved one reached the other side, and someone was there waiting for him. Catholic doctrine teaches that the saints intercede for us from glory, and James, as the first apostolic martyr, as the one who broke the ground with his own blood before any other of the 12, occupies a very particular place in that intercession. Saint Teresa of Jesus understood this from the inside, from prayer, from those hours when God would show her the life of heaven, the way one shows a finished tapestry where every thread has its exact place. In the interior castle, in the 7th mansion, she describes the state of the soul that already sees God face to face, and she speaks of how that soul keeps everything it lived on earth, transformed, purified, turned into light. James keeps his own death with him in heaven. He carries it always, the way Peter carries the keys and Paul the sword of the word. The death of James is his credential before every soul that steps trembling into eternity. I have been through here already, James says without words, because in heaven words are unnecessary. I already felt the blade at my neck. I already saw the world go dark, and look what is on the other side. There is something Christ promised James that still remains to be uncovered in this journey. A promise recorded in the Gospels, one you have probably read without realizing who it was addressed to, and it changes the whole meaning of what James does for departed souls every 25th of July. That promise has to do with a chalice and with a question Christ asked James in front of his own mother. The scene takes place somewhere along the road to Jerusalem, most likely in the region of Judea, shortly before the final Passover. Matthew tells it in chapter 20, starting at verse 20, and it begins with a mother. The mother of James and John, the wife of Zebedee, came up to Christ with her 2 sons and knelt down in front of him. She wanted to ask him for something. Christ said to her, "What do you want?" And she answered with the most understandable ambition in the world. "Command that these 2 sons of mine may sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your kingdom." A mother asking for the best for her sons, that was all. A woman who had seen the miracles with her own eyes, who had believed in the promise of the kingdom from the very first day, who had followed her husband Zebedee and her 2 sons from the fishing boats of Galilee to the dusty streets of Judea, and who wanted to make sure that her family's entire sacrifice would carry a reward worthy of the price they had paid. The other 10 apostles were indignant when they heard about it. Matthew says they became angry with the 2 brothers, but Christ did not get angry. Christ did something different. He looked at James and John and threw them a question that split their lives in half. Are you able to drink the chalice that I am going to drink? That question is the heart of everything you are hearing tonight. Because Christ did not ask Peter. He did not ask Andrew or Philip or Matthew or Bartholomew. He asked James and John, the two brothers, the sons of Zebedee. And James answered, "Yes, we are able," the two of them said. And Christ answered them with a sentence that sealed the destiny of James forever. "My chalice you shall indeed drink." Pause here for a moment and think about what just happened. Christ has just told James in front of his mother, in front of the other apostles, in front of everyone, "You are going to die the way I die. You are going to drink the chalice of suffering, the chalice of surrender, the chalice of blood poured out." And James said yes without knowing exactly what that meant. He said yes the way those who love say yes, without calculating, without measuring, without asking for the details of what was coming. Years later, in Jerusalem, when Herod raised the sword, the chalice filled up. James drank it whole, every drop. And in that moment, the promise of Christ came true down to the letter. "My chalice you shall indeed drink." James drank his first, before Peter on the inverted cross, before Paul under the imperial sword in Rome, before all of them. And what does that chalice have to do with your departed loved one? It has everything to do with him. Because Catholic doctrine teaches that the purification of the soul after death is a chalice. The souls in purgatory drink their own chalice of purification before entering into glory. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, in number 1030, speaks of a final purification that those who die in the grace of God pass through in order to reach the holiness necessary to enter into the joy of heaven. That purification is a chalice, and James, who already drank his own on earth under Herod's sword, knows the taste of that swallow. For this reason, James has authority over the souls that are being purified, because he has already been through the fire. He already felt the blades split open his neck. He already went through that fraction of a second in which life ends and something begins that human words cannot reach. And that experience gives him a nearness to the souls in purgatory that other saints, as great as they may be, hold from a different place. Saint Teresa of Jesus understood this connection between the chalice of Christ and the purification of souls in a way that runs through her whole work. In The Way of Perfection, in chapter 26, she speaks of how the Our Father contains the petition, "Thy will be done," and she explains that this petition is the chalice. To accept the will of God is to drink the chalice. James accepted it that afternoon on a road in Judea when he said, "We are able." And your departed loved one is accepting it now in purgatory, every time the purification takes one more step toward the light. The mother of James asked for a throne. Christ gave her a sword. She asked for glory and received blood. She asked that her son might be seated at the right hand of the king. And what she obtained was for her son to die first, before all the others, beheaded on a hillside in Jerusalem one noonday in July. But here is what that mother could not yet see, and what you, from this side of history, can understand. The sword was the throne. The blood was the glory. His death was his seat at the right hand of the king. Because in the kingdom of Christ, the one who drinks the chalice first is the one who reaches the table first. And James reached the table first. He is seated. From there he looks upon every soul that climbs the road of purification with an understanding that only belongs to the one who has already walked that road with the sword at his neck. Your departed loved one is on that road right now. And there are 3 scenes from the life of James that explain exactly what the apostle does for every soul in transit. 3 moments when Christ chose James, along with Peter and John, to be present for something the other 9 apostles never saw. 3 scenes that have to do with death, with glory, and with agony. The same 3 stages that every soul passes through after leaving the body. And the first one begins in the house of a man named Jairus with a dead girl on the bed. Why did Christ send everyone out of the room except for 3? Mark tells it in chapter 5, starting at verse 35. Jairus, a leader of the synagogue, had gone out looking for Christ because his 12-year-old daughter was dying. He found him surrounded by a crowd. He begged him to come to his house, and Christ agreed. But on the way, they stopped. A woman with a hemorrhage touched the cloak of Christ, and he paused to speak with her. And while that conversation was going on, some messengers arrived from the house of Jairus with the news, "Your daughter has died. Do not trouble the teacher any further." Christ heard those words, and he said only one thing to Jairus, "Do not fear, only have faith." He did not explain anything else. He did not give him a speech about resurrection or promise him a miracle with long words, 7 words. And Jairus had to walk the rest of the way, holding on to those 7 words the way a man holds onto a rope in the dark. They arrived at the house. There were flute players, mourning women, people wailing at the top of their lungs, the way Jewish custom demanded when someone died. The noise was deafening. The women beat their chests, tore out locks of their hair, wailed with a rehearsed cadence they had been repeating at every death in the village for generations. Christ walked in through the middle of all that noise and said something that made them laugh. "The girl is not dead, she is asleep." They laughed at him. They laughed in his face, in front of the father who was trembling and the mother who did not even have strength left to cry. And then Christ did something that few people who read this passage stopped to consider. He put them all out. The mourning women, the neighbors, the curious onlookers, the extended family. He put all of them out of the house, and after emptying the room, he let only 5 people go in: the father of the girl, the mother of the girl, Peter, James, and John. Why James? Out of the 12, Christ could have picked anyone. He could have invited Andrew, the brother of Peter. He could have called on Matthew, who was schooled and knew how to record what he saw. He could have brought Philip or Bartholomew. He chose James. He walked him into the room where a dead girl was lying and let him watch what was about to happen. Christ took the girl by the hand. Mark preserved the exact words in Aramaic, Talitha kum. "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And the girl opened her eyes. She stood up. She began to walk. She was 12 years old and she had been dead for minutes, and now she was walking around the room while her mother trembled on her knees in a corner, and her father could not get a single word out of his mouth. James saw all of that. He saw the hand of Christ take the cold hand of a dead child. He saw the color return to her face. He saw the eyes open. He saw the feet touch the floor. And he kept that image inside him for years, until Herod sent for him that July morning in Jerusalem, and the sword came down on his neck. Do you think James remembered the daughter of Jairus in the moment of his own death? Do you think that in the fraction of a second, when the blade cut through his flesh and the world went dark, he remembered that room where Christ had said to a dead child, "Arise," and the dead child obeyed? The tradition of the fathers says that martyrs die with a vision of heaven opened. Stephen, the first martyr of the church, said before dying, "I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." James may have seen something similar. He may have seen the same Christ who took the hand of that girl in Capernaum, now standing in glory, waiting for him on the other side of the sword. And that connection between the death of the girl and the death of James is what gives the apostle his particular mission with departed souls. Because James knows how a dead person is awakened. He saw it. He was there. He was one of the 3 witnesses to the first act of Christ's power over death in a closed, intimate space, without crowds, without speeches, without spectacle. A room with 5 people, a dead child, and the voice of Christ saying, "Arise." The soul of your departed loved one needs that voice. And James, who heard it ring out in a room in Capernaum almost 2,000 years ago, carries it engraved into his very existence in heaven. Every 25th of July, when the church celebrates his feast, that voice rings out in a particular way through the intercession of the apostle. James draws near to the souls still in the darkness of purification and gives them what he himself once heard: arise. Saint Teresa of Jesus describes, in the fifth mansion of the interior castle, a state of the soul she calls the prayer of union, and she compares it to a silkworm that dies inside its cocoon in order to be reborn as a white butterfly. That Teresian image connects directly with what James saw in the house of Jairus. The girl was dead, sealed up in her cocoon of cold flesh, and Christ pulled her out of there, transformed, alive, on her feet, walking. Saint Teresa of Jesus understood that Christian death works this way: a cocoon that cracks open, a worm that disappears, a butterfly that flies off toward a light that human eyes cannot look upon. But there is a second scene, and this one is larger, because in the second scene, James did not watch Christ wake up someone who was dead. He saw something greater. He saw the glory of God face to face, on a mountain, in full light, without any filter. And what he saw on that mountain burned into the eyes of his soul in a way that for the rest of his earthly life never faded. 6 days after Peter's confession at Caesarea Philippi, Christ went up a high mountain away from the road, and he took the same 3 with him, Peter, James, and John. Matthew tells it in chapter 17, Mark in chapter 9, Luke in chapter 9 as well. All 3 gospel writers agree on what happened that afternoon on the mountaintop, and all 3 agree on a detail that sometimes gets overlooked. Christ chose the same 3 he had brought into the room of the daughter of Jairus, the same 3. There was no drawing of lots, there was no rotation. Christ walked James through the death of a girl, and then he walked him through his own glory, in that order: first death, then glory. As if the soul had to see death before being able to bear the vision of the light. At the top of the mountain, Christ was transfigured in front of them. His face shone like the sun. His clothes turned white as the light. Matthew says, like the sun. Mark says, like snow. Luke says, like lightning. 3 evangelists trying to describe something that human words cannot contain. And at the side of Christ, Moses and Elijah appeared, speaking with him. James was there, standing, with his eyes open, looking at something no living human being was ever meant to see: the glory of God without a filter, without a veil, without a parable. The pure light of the Son of God spilling out over a mountainside in Galilee like a white fire that does not burn the skin, but devours the soul. The Old Testament tells us that Moses had to cover his face with a veil after speaking with God on Sinai, because the people could not bear the brightness that had lingered on his face. James saw the source of that brightness. He saw the one who put the glow onto Moses' skin, and he had no veil. Peter reacted by talking. That is what Peter always does. He talks when he should keep quiet. He said, "Lord, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." Mark clarifies that Peter did not know what he was saying because they were terrified. But James and John said nothing. They stayed silent, watching, soaking in the light with the eyes of the soul until the cloud covered them and the voice of the Father thundered out, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." Afterward, they came down from the mountain. The walk back must have been long and silent. The 3 apostles walked behind Christ with their eyes fixed on the ground, unable to look at each other, unable to speak of what they had seen. Christ ordered them not to tell anyone what they had witnessed until the Son of Man had risen from the dead, and they kept quiet. James kept quiet for years. He carried that vision hidden inside his chest, the way one carries an ember wrapped in ash, without letting anyone see it, without speaking of it until after the resurrection. And what does the transfiguration have to do with the soul of your departed loved one? Everything. Because what James saw on Tabor is exactly what the soul of your departed loved one will see when his purification is finished and he enters into the glory of heaven. The beatific vision, the direct contemplation of God face to face, without intermediaries, without sacraments, without the barrier of the mortal body. That which theologians call the visio Dei, the sight without a veil upon the divine essence, is what James experienced in advance that afternoon on the mountain. James saw it before dying. Your departed loved one will see it after being purified, and that coincidence binds them together in a way few people understand. Saint Teresa of Jesus describes it in the 7th mansion of the interior castle, with a clarity that few mystical writers have ever reached in the history of the Church. She writes that at the highest degree of union with God, the soul experiences an intellectual vision of the Most Holy Trinity that transforms its whole way of being. She says that this vision, once received, never fades. The soul carries it always the way one carries a mark on the forehead that others cannot see, but that changes the way one walks, the way one breathes, the way one is in the world. What Saint Teresa of Jesus describes there is the same thing James saw on Tabor. The difference is that Teresa received it in prayer, inside her cell, and James received it standing up on a mountain, with the wind hitting him in the face. And here something closes that was opened at the very beginning. Do you remember the promise Christ made to James? My chalice you shall indeed drink. That promise has two faces. The chalice of suffering, which James drank under the sword of Herod in Jerusalem, and the chalice of glory, which James saw in advance in the light of Tabor. The two faces of the same chalice, the sword and the light, death and transfiguration. James received both, and that is why his intercession before departed souls covers both stages, the purification that hurts and the glory that waits at the end of the road. Your departed loved one is between those two shores, between the sword and the light, between the fire of purgatory and the whiteness of Tabor. And James knows both shores because he was on both of them. He saw death in the house of Jairus. He saw glory on Tabor. And now, from heaven, he accompanies the souls that travel from one shore to the other. But the third scene is still missing, the darkest of all three, the one that happened at night in an olive grove on the outskirts of Jerusalem, when James saw Christ do something none of the 12 ever expected to see, tremble with fear. The air smelled of ripe olives and damp earth. It was night. It was cold. The moon of Nisan, full as the rules of the Jewish calendar require for the celebration of Passover, lit up the garden of Gethsemane with a yellow light that filtered through the leaves of the olive trees and painted shadows on the ground like ink stains on an old parchment. Christ had eaten supper with the 12 in an upper room of a house in Jerusalem. He had broken the bread. He had blessed the wine. He had washed the feet of every one of them, including the feet of Judas, who already had the 30 pieces of silver tied up in his purse. And after singing the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Mark tells it in chapter 14, starting at verse 32. Christ arrived at the garden and said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go to pray." And he took with him Peter, James, and John, the same three. For the third time, the room of the dead child, the mountain of the light, and now the garden of the agony. And then the text says something that turns the blood cold. He began to feel dread and anguish. Mark uses the Greek word ektambistai, which translators render as terror, horror, a shudder that goes beyond ordinary fear. Christ, the same one who walked on the water, the same one who calmed the storm with a command, the same one who looked at the death of the daughter of Jairus and said to her, "Arise," was now trembling. He said to the three, "My soul is sorrowful even unto death. Stay here and keep watch." James heard that sentence, "My soul is sorrowful even unto death." He heard it from the mouth of the man he had seen transfigured on Tabor weeks earlier, shining like the sun, speaking with Moses and Elijah. And now that same man was on his knees among the olive trees, his face pressed to the dirt, sweating blood. Luke is the only evangelist who records the detail of the sweat of blood. Chapter 22, verse 44. His sweat became like thick drops of blood falling to the ground. Doctors call it hematidrosis. It happens when the anguish is so extreme that the capillaries surrounding the sweat glands burst and the blood mixes with the sweat. It is a real phenomenon documented in medical literature that only occurs under stress so intense that the body begins to fail. And Christ went through it in Gethsemane, only a few yards from where James was trying to keep his eyes open. Because James fell asleep, all three of them fell asleep. Christ came back from his prayer and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "Could you not keep watch with me for 1 hour?" That question was for all three of them, for Peter, for James, and for John. All three failed. All three closed their eyes at the exact moment when Christ most needed someone to be with him in his agony. And that failure is part of the mission of James with the souls in purgatory. Because James knows what it is to fall asleep while someone you love is suffering. He knows what it is to open your eyes and discover that you arrived too late, that the moment passed, that the person who needed your watching had already gone through the worst of it alone. And that guilt, that shame of having failed in Gethsemane, is exactly what you feel when you think about your departed loved one and you wonder whether you did enough, whether you were there, whether you kept watch the way you should have, whether you said everything you had to say before he was gone. James carries that same question, redeemed by grace. Christ forgave him. After the resurrection, after Pentecost, James understood that his failure at Gethsemane had been turned into compassion, because the one who has failed knows how to comfort the one who fails. And James, from heaven, comforts the souls that arrive with that same open wound. I did not do enough. I was not there when I should have been. I fell asleep when I should have kept watch. Saint Teresa of Jesus knew that experience of failing before Christ. In chapter 9 of the book of her life, she confesses that she spent years far from prayer, that she stopped praying during a season of her life, and that dryness filled her with a guilt that nearly destroyed her. But she also says that when she came back to prayer, she found Christ waiting for her with open arms, without reproach, without punishment, with the same patience with which he waited for the 3 sleeping apostles in the garden. Saint Teresa of Jesus understood Gethsemane from the inside, from her own experience of having fallen asleep spiritually and having woken up with the shame stuck to her chest. Your departed loved one, while being purified, feels something similar. Catholic tradition teaches that part of the purification of purgatory includes an awareness of one's own failures. The times you fell asleep when you should have been keeping watch, the times you closed your eyes when someone nearby was suffering, the times when the tiredness of the world beat prayer out of you. And James, who lived through exactly that at Gethsemane, is beside those souls telling them what Christ told him after the resurrection. Arise, it is over, come with me now. The 3 scenes form a complete arc: the death of the daughter of Jairus, the glory of Tabor, the agony of Gethsemane. James was present for all 3. He was an eyewitness to the 3 most intimate revelations Christ ever made about death, about glory, and about suffering. And those 3 scenes match the 3 stages the soul of your departed loved one passes through after death: the dark passage, the promise of glory, and the painful purification that burns away what does not belong so that the soul can fit through the door of heaven. James knows every stage because he saw them with the eyes of the flesh before living them with the eyes of the soul. Understand something before we go further. What you are hearing tonight has a root that touches the earth Saint Teresa of Jesus walked. Saint James the Apostle is the patron of Spain, and Teresa was born in Avila in Castile, at the heart of a land that had been walking toward Compostela for centuries, in order to kneel before the remains of the apostle. Tradition says that after the martyrdom of James in Jerusalem, his disciples Athanasius and Theodore gathered up the body of the apostle and carried it in a boat all the way to the coast of Galicia. The journey, according to the oldest sources, followed the Mediterranean route, hugged the Atlantic coast of the Iberian Peninsula, and ended at the mouth of the river Ulla in the estuary of Arosa. The legend says the trip lasted 7 days, which is geographically impossible but theologically fitting. 7 is the number of divine perfection, the number of the days of creation, and God wanted the body of the first apostolic martyr to reach the land where his veneration was most needed in the exact number of days it took him to make the world. The remains were buried in a forest and forgotten for 8 centuries, until a hermit named Pelayo saw mysterious lights over a field and warned the bishop Teodomiro of Iria Flavia. They dug. They found the tomb. And on top of that tomb rose the cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, Campus Stelae, Field of Stars. That is the origin of the name Compostela, according to the most widely accepted tradition. And since the 9th century, millions of people have walked for weeks and months toward that field of stars in order to ask something of James. Barefoot pilgrims, kings with their retinues, monks in silence, peasant women with feet ruined by the mud of Castile, all walking toward the same tomb, all asking for the same thing without knowing it, that James would intercede for them and for their dead. Saint Teresa of Jesus was born and lived in that world. Devotion to James was the air Castile breathed in the 16th century. Every village, however small, had a chapel or at least an altar dedicated to the apostle. Every parish celebrated the 25th of July with a solemn procession, with a sung mass, with bells that rang out from sunrise until the sun dropped down behind the mountains. Teresa founded convents up and down that Castile that venerated James as patron and protector. In the book of her foundations, she describes the exhausting journeys she made along the roads of Spain to bring the Carmelite reform from city to city. Those roads were the same roads that the pilgrims walked toward Compostela. The same land, the same dust, the same sun beating down on the plateau like a slab of fire. It is no coincidence that the greatest saint of Spain, the mystical doctor of the Church, was born in a land that was making its pilgrimage toward James. Teresa understood from childhood that walking toward a saint is a form of prayer, that the body that suffers on the road is praying with every step, with every drop of sweat, with every muscle that hurts at the end of the day, that blisters on your feet are a rosary of flesh. And that understanding of pilgrimage as physical prayer sits at the root of her whole teaching on the interior castle. The soul walks toward God, passing from mansion to mansion, exactly the way a pilgrim walks toward Compostela, passing from town to town. Think now about your departed loved one. His soul is on pilgrimage. He is walking from mansion to mansion inside the castle of purgatory, moving step by step toward the final mansion, where the light of Tabor waits for him with open arms. And James, the saint to whom millions of pilgrims have entrusted their steps and their dead for more than 1,000 years, walks beside that soul on every stretch of the road. Every 25th of July, the apostle receives a new wave of prayers offered by the living for their departed, and he channels those prayers toward the souls closest to finishing their pilgrimage. On the 25th of July, the day of the Feast of James, the Church concentrates her liturgical prayer on the intercession of this apostle in a way that does not happen the rest of the year. The Masses celebrated that day around the whole world call upon James with a particular intensity. The prayers of the faithful rise up to heaven with the name of the apostle as a seal. And James, who has spent centuries receiving the requests of the pilgrims walking toward his tomb, also receives the requests of those who walk on the inside, those who make the pilgrimage in the soul, because the body has already been left behind on a hospital bed or in the seat of a car or on the table of an operating room. Do something concrete. Do not let the 25th of July go by like just another day on the calendar. If you can go to Mass that day, go. If you can request that the intention of that Mass be for the soul of your departed loved one under the intercession of St. James the Apostle, ask for it. Tell the priest the name of your departed loved one. Say it out loud. Let the name of your dead resound inside the church on the day of James, because that name, spoken during the Mass of the 25th of July, carries a weight it does not carry on any other day of the year. And if you cannot go to Mass that day, pray at home. Pray wherever you are. Kneel if you can, or sit if your body will not let you kneel, and say the name of your departed loved one out loud, and ask James to walk with him on whatever stretch of the road he still has to travel. Do it with the faith of the pilgrim who has 100 kilometers already on his feet and still has 200 to go, but who knows that at the end of the road the cathedral is waiting, and that inside the cathedral the apostle is waiting for him. Imagine you could talk with James. Imagine he sat down across from you in your kitchen with his hands weathered by the nets of Galilee and the mark of the sword still visible on his neck, and he told you, "I do 3 things for the soul of your departed loved one every time the church celebrates my feast. 3 things I learned by watching my master do them when he was still alive. The first thing is to call her." James calls the souls of the departed the same way he watched Christ call the daughter of Jairus, "Talitha cum, arise." That command Christ spoke over a dead girl in a room in Capernaum still rings out in the voice of James every 25th of July. James draws near the souls sunk in the darkest part of the purification, the souls that feel the night of purgatory has no bottom, and he speaks to them with the authority of the first martyr, "Arise. Do not stay here. There is light further on. I saw it with my own eyes on a mountain in Galilee, and I tell you it is real." Catholic doctrine teaches that the souls in purgatory cannot merit for themselves. They are no longer in the time of meriting. They are in the time of being purified. But they can receive the intercession of the saints and the suffrages of the living. And when James calls them, those souls receive a push that brings them one step closer to the way out. Like the pilgrim who has been walking for hours under the sun and suddenly hears the bells of the cathedral in the distance. The bells do not take away his tiredness, but they remind him that the end of the road exists. James is that bell for the souls in purgatory. The second thing James does is show them the glory that awaits at the end of the road. On Tabor, James saw Christ transfigured. He saw the glory of God without a filter, without a parable, without any mediation. He saw the light that pours out of the sun when the sun chooses to stop holding it back. And now, from heaven, James shows each soul a flash of that same glory. The way a person opens a window in a dark room for half a second and lets in a ray of sunlight that stabs into the eyes and leaves them blinded with light for a moment. That flash is enough for the soul to know that the purification has meaning, that the pain has a purpose, that at the end of the road there is something so great, so beautiful, so utterly out of scale with the present suffering that it is worth every second of waiting. Saint Teresa of Jesus describes similar experiences in the 6th mansion of the interior castle. She speaks of what she calls flights of the spirit, moments when the soul is carried away by God and receives a foretaste of glory that lasts barely an instant but is enough to change one's whole life. She writes that after those moments the soul is so changed that nothing happening on earth can take away its peace. It is left with an unshakable certainty that everything it suffers in this world is worth it, because what awaits it at the end is so overwhelmingly greater than any present pain that the comparison becomes almost absurd. That is exactly what James shows the souls in purgatory. A flight of the Spirit, a flash from Tabor, 1 second of light that gives them the strength to keep walking. And the third thing James does is walk beside them in the agony of the purification. At Gethsemane, James saw Christ in agony. He saw the Son of God tremble with fear at what was coming, sweat blood into the dirt, ask the Father to take the chalice away if it was possible. And though James fell asleep, though he failed, Christ forgave him and turned that failure into a mission. Now James walks beside the souls that are in the hardest part of their purification, the part that looks like Gethsemane, the dark night of purgatory where the soul feels that God has withdrawn and that the suffering will not end. James sits down beside those souls the way an older brother sits down beside a younger brother crying in the night. He walks with them in silence. He does not preach speeches. He does not explain theology. With his presence, he says what words cannot. I too was afraid. I too closed my eyes when I should have kept them open. I too failed. But look where I am now. Look what is on the other side of the fear. The sword fell on my neck, and what I found on the other side was the embrace of the Master who had forgiven me before I even knew I needed forgiveness. Those three actions form the heart of the intercession of St. James, the Apostle on behalf of departed souls. To call, the way Christ called the daughter of Jairus. To show, the way Christ showed his glory on Tabor. To walk beside, the way Christ asked for company at Gethsemane. James learned them in the three scenes Christ allowed him to witness while he was still walking on the earth. And he carries them out from heaven with the authority of the first apostle, who drank the chalice down to the bottom. Your departed loved one is receiving that right now. While you are listening to these words, James is beside the soul of your loved one, doing what he learned from Christ, calling him to arise when he sinks, showing him a flash of glory when the darkness tightens, and sitting down beside him in silence when the agony of the purification makes him feel he is alone. But there is still something important to say, something that depends on you, because James does his part from heaven, but there is a part only you can do from earth, and that part has to be done before the 25th of July, not after. Not when you happen to remember, not when you have the time, before. The Catechism of the Catholic Church in number 1032 says clearly that the faithful can help the souls in purgatory through suffrages, especially the Eucharistic sacrifice, prayers, and almsgiving. 3 channels, 3 concrete ways to send help to the soul of your departed loved one. And the 25th of July, the day of St. James the Apostle, is one of the most effective dates in the liturgical calendar to open all 3 of those channels at once. The first action is to request a Mass for your departed loved one with the explicit intention that James intercede. Go to your parish before the 25th of July. Do not leave it for later. Do not wait until you have extra time, because there is never extra time, and the souls in purgatory cannot wait until it is convenient for you to pray for them. Speak to the priest. Tell him you want to offer the Mass of the day of St. James the Apostle for the soul of your loved one. Give him the full name of your departed loved one, first name and last name, the way they were given at baptism. Ask that it be mentioned in the intentions of that Mass. The Eucharistic sacrifice is the most powerful source of suffrage the Church possesses. Every Mass that is celebrated makes present the sacrifice of Christ on Calvary, and the infinite merits of that sacrifice are applied to the souls for whom it is offered. When that Mass coincides with the feast of James, the intercession of the Apostle joins the power of the sacrament like a current running into a river. If you cannot request a Mass in advance, look for a parish that celebrates Mass on the 25th of July. Go, and during the Eucharistic prayer, when the priest prays for the departed, say the name of your loved one in your heart. Say it inside you with all the strength of your whole soul, as if you were shouting in silence. and ask James to take that name and to bring it before Christ at that precise instant. That silent prayer inside the Mass has more force than you imagine, because you are asking within the most sacred moment of the Catholic liturgy, the moment when Christ himself is present on the altar, real, alive, with the same flesh that James touched in Galilee. The second action is to pray the following prayer 9 days in a row, starting on the 16th of July and finishing on the 24th, the eve of the feast. 9 days, a novena. The oldest structure of preparatory prayer the Church has, born from the time the apostles spent in prayer between the ascension of Christ into heaven and the coming of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost. The apostles prayed for 9 days in a row, and on the 10th day they received the fire. You are going to pray for 9 days in a row, and on the 10th day, the 25th of July, James will receive your prayer with the built-up strength of 9 nights of faithfulness. The prayer is simple. It can be said at any moment of the day, but it is more powerful if you pray it at night before sleep, when the world falls quiet and the soul is left alone with God. It goes like this. Glorious Saint James the Apostle, first martyr of the 12, you who drank the chalice of Christ before all others, and now intercede from glory for the souls of the faithful departed, I ask you to walk beside the soul of my loved one, and hear you say the name of your departed loved one out loud on his road of purification. Call him with the voice you learned in Capernaum. Show him the glory you saw on Tabor. Walk beside him in his agony the way you learned in Gethsemane. And present him to Christ clean, free, ready to enter into the eternal light. Amen. 3 sentences. Each sentence matches one of the 3 scenes we have walked through together tonight. Memorize them. Repeat them every night for 9 nights. And when the 25th of July arrives, the day of James, that prayer will have built a road of intercession, connecting your voice with the voice of the apostle and the voice of the apostle with the throne of Christ. The third action is almsgiving. The Catechism mentions it alongside the Eucharistic sacrifice and prayer as one of the 3 forms of suffrage for the departed. Give something concrete in the name of your loved one before the 25th of July. Not something symbolic, not something that costs you nothing at all, something that hurts a little because true suffrage has the taste of sacrifice. It can be money handed to someone who needs it. It can be food brought to a family going hungry. It can be an hour of your time given to visit a sick person in a hospital or an elderly person who lives alone. What matters is that it be a real sacrifice, something that costs you, something you feel leaving you like a piece of your own comfort handed over so that someone else can make use of it. Offer that sacrifice in the name of your departed loved one and ask James to bring it before Christ as a merit applied to the purification of that soul. And here what I promised you at the start of tonight comes to a close. The question we opened together when you began to listen. Do you remember? What happens to the soul of your departed loved one on the 25th of July? Now you know. James calls him. James shows him the glory. James walks beside him in the agony. And you from earth can strengthen that intercession with 3 concrete actions: the Mass, the prayer, and the almsgiving. All of it before the 25th of July. All of it with the name of your loved one on your lips. All of it with the faith of the one who knows that at the end of the road there is a cathedral, and that inside that cathedral, beside the high altar, an apostle is waiting for you with open arms, with the mark of the sword on his neck, with the light of Tabor in his eyes, and with the name of your departed loved one already written on the palm of his hand. You have made it this far, and that means something. It means that the soul of your departed loved one matters enough to you, that you have listened to every word of this night without skipping ahead, without getting distracted, without looking for a quick summary that would spare you the road. You walk with me from the beginning to this moment, and now you carry inside you something you did not have before. You carry the story of James. Not the story they tell you in the textbooks, the one that gets boiled down to 2 lines in the book of Acts and to a small picture on the wall of the parish. You carry the true story. The story of the man who left his nets on the shore of the lake of Gennesaret and followed a Galilean rabbi without knowing that this following would end with a sword at his neck and with an eternity of intercession for the ones who would come after him. You carry the chalice Christ offered him and that he accepted without calculating the price, without asking for details, without asking how much it was going to hurt. You carry the room of the daughter of Jairus, where 3 apostles saw a dead girl open her eyes and get on her feet. You carry the mountain of Tabor, where the glory of God burned into the eyes of the soul of James and left him with a mark that still shines in heaven. You carry the Garden of Gethsemane, where James fell asleep when Christ most needed him, and where Christ forgave him before James had time to ask for forgiveness. And you carry the 3 actions James carries out on every soul in transit, at the call, the vision, the walking beside. That is already inside you. No one can take it away. Not the tiredness of tomorrow, not the worries waiting for you when you turn off this screen, not the noise of the world trying to cover over what you have just received, because what you have just received did not come in through the head, it came in through the chest. And what comes in through the chest stays there for good. Saint Teresa of Jesus said it with a clarity that cut through the air. The truths God places in the soul during prayer are not forgotten. Dates can be forgotten, names, historical details, verses and chapters. But the certainty that God is acting on the soul of your departed loved one, that certainty you felt at some moment tonight, like a warmth in the center of your chest, like a knot in your throat that would not let you swallow, like tears that came up without warning and that you could not explain, that certainty does not fade. It is yours. God gave it to you tonight, and no one can pull it out of you. And now you have to do something with it. You have the Mass, you have the 9-day novena, you have the almsgiving, 3 concrete actions you can begin tomorrow, and you have a date burned in, 25th of July. The day when James receives, with a particular intensity, the prayers of those asking for their dead. That day already has a name written on it, the name of your departed loved one. Because you wrote it in a comment at the beginning of tonight, or you said it in silence inside your heart, and James received it. Now, I want you to think about something more. What you have just heard about James and departed souls is one part of something bigger, much bigger. Because the intercession of the saints for the departed does not end with James. Every apostle, every martyr, every saint of the church has a particular mission with the souls in purgatory that depends on how he lived, how he died, and what Christ showed him during his time on earth. James has his own because he was the first to die and because he witnessed the 3 scenes you already know. But there are other saints whose intercession for the departed operates from angles we have not yet explored together, from different mystical experiences, from revelations the Church has guarded for centuries that very few Catholics know. Saint Teresa of Jesus devoted a great part of her life of prayer to interceding for the souls in purgatory. In the book of her life, in the book of her foundations, in her letters, there are traces of what she came to understand about the relationship between the saints in heaven and the souls who still wait. Those traces form a map, a spiritual map that connects every feast of the liturgical calendar with a concrete opportunity to help your departed loved one from a different angle. What we did tonight with James is what can be done with every saint whose feast is coming up on the calendar. Every date is a door. Every door opens with a specific prayer, with a precise knowledge of what that saint lived through and how that life shapes his intercession. If you felt something in your chest tonight, if at some moment of what you heard tears came to your eyes, or your throat tightened up, or you felt that James was closer than you thought possible, then you need to keep listening. Not out of curiosity, not for entertainment. because the soul of your departed loved one depends on you continuing to learn how to help him. Every truth that enters your heart becomes prayer. Every prayer born of truth carries a weight that mechanical prayers do not have. And what comes after tonight goes deeper into what you have already received. It carries it further in. It connects it with truths Saint Teresa of Jesus left written in her works, and that, when you hear them together, form a complete teaching on how to help your departed loved one from every corner of the liturgical calendar. Do not leave yet. Stay a moment more. Breathe deep. Close your eyes if you can, if you are somewhere no one is watching you, if it is night and the house has gone quiet. Let what you have received settle into the depth of your soul, the way sediment settles at the bottom of a river after a great flood. And when you open your eyes, when you look back at the screen, another opportunity will appear in front of you to keep walking down this same road you started tonight. Another door, another saint, another truth your departed loved one needs you to hear, because the prayers born of understanding are more powerful than the prayers born of habit. Saint Teresa of Jesus repeats it over and over in the way of perfection. Pray with understanding. Pray knowing what you are asking. Pray with the eyes of the soul open. That is what you are doing here. And that is what your departed loved one needs you to keep doing. The road does not end tonight. Tonight is a stretch, the stretch of James. The stretch of the first martyr, of the one who drank the chalice before all the others, of the one who saw the death, the glory, and the agony of Christ with his own eyes. But there are more stretches, and every one of them brings the soul of your departed loved one one step closer to the light James saw on Tabor. Keep walking. And now, before you go, before the world starts pulling at your attention again with its noises and its urgencies and its screens blinking at you to look somewhere else, receive this. Receive it the way one receives an embrace from someone who loves you well. May the God of James, the God who gave him strength to drink the chalice without turning away, without trembling, without letting go of the hand of the Master who was leading him to the sword, give you that same strength to pray for your departed loved one without growing tired, without giving up, without letting discouragement convince you that your prayers do nothing. May Saint James the Apostle, the first of the 12, to enter into the glory of heaven, walk with the soul of your loved one on every step of his purification, and show him the flash of light he saw on the mountain. May Saint Teresa of Jesus, who understood from her cell in Avila what the apostles understood from the roads of Galilee, intercede for you and for those you love before the throne of the Lamb. And may the peace of Christ, the peace the world cannot give and cannot take away, remain with you tonight and all the nights that come after, until the day when you also cross to the other side and find James waiting for you with the same smile that broke across his face when he saw the daughter of Jairus rise up from her bed. May God bless you. May the Most Holy Virgin Mary cover you with her mantle. And may James, patron of pilgrims and protector of the souls on the road, never let go of the hand of your departed loved one until he places him clean, free, shining, and at peace at the feet of the Lord. Amen.